Sisam, you are here.
So excited to be here.
I am so happy to have this conversation with Andiswa Bata, who's the CEO of FNB Business. And she's spent time chatting to some of the young people this morning. How did you find it?
Despite the cold weather, the engagement was very hot and warm.
Yes.
They put me on the spot with some fantastic questions, which I think just shows their own passion and engagement.
Where did it all start with you? You know, people see people like you, CEO of, FNB Business, but we don't have these linear journeys, right? Where did it all begin for you?
And I think to that point, before I tell you about my journey, it can be very easy to find people in positions to be distant because you see them as they are today with whatever the car or house they live in or whatever, or where their kids go to school, whatever like that. But you forget that there's a backstory to each person, and that texture, I think, actually helps. So thank you for asking me that question because I love to answer it, actually. So I was born as Klinik outside of King Williamstown in the Eastern Cape. Exactly. So I then grew up in King Williamstown for most of my life. And a key nexus point came when it was time to leave King after matric. And I was so fortunate to be able to then go to UCT at the time, where I did a business science degree. And after graduating, started working, and you find me here today, 18 years, I would say, as a career banker.
Young people have this view that if I study marketing, I'll be a marketer. I study law, I'll be a lawyer. Give me a sense of how your career has given you different dimensions of what you study versus what you get to know and what you get to use.
Sure. So the studies helped in some aspect because I did a finance commerce degree and I'm in banking. So obviously some of the basics were very helpful to be established at that stage. But I would say that probably only 20 or 30% of what I actually need in terms of my toolkit every single day. The rest of it, particularly when you're not a specialist and you're actually more a people leader or manager, nobody throws a psychology textbook at you to tell you how the human brain works and how you need to lead or manage people. Nobody has thrown a textbook at you to say this is how you're going to best engage with an audience that maybe you're seeking to sell something to. And so I think very linear views about what you study determines who you are actually too rigid, to be honest, because it counts for something, but it's not everything you're going to need eventually.
Navigating corporate spaces requires a lot. Give me 3 things that you would say to a young professional who's navigating these things within a corporate. What are those things that have been helping you to move up the corporate ladder and taking on these bigger responsibilities?
So, and I spoke about it during my engagement with some of the young entrepreneurs and business leaders earlier today. I think it goes without saying, as a first step, don't underestimate what a good track record sets for you. And that's simply just work hard, do well, deliver on time, be reliable. When somebody says, this is the thing I'm asking you to do, do it very well. And if you can, the first time around. And preferably ahead of the deadline. However you may have chosen to outperform. So you can't take, because also nobody can take that away from you. That track record of delivery and performance actually has to be the building block. Because not everybody starts and then on day one they're managing 1,000 people. Actually, what determines a lot of your career trajectory is how solid you are at your core job. So let's not throw that away, everybody. I think that that's actually the first piece of credibility that one needs. Then I think the second one I wish to highlight is around being yourself. So I draw the line at being rude or disrespectful, but actually I find that directness or bluntness is actually the way to go, because I think it's a great power when you tell people because then they also always know where they stand with you. They have your most authentic thought. And then they also know how to reply or respond to you or support you.
You bring yourself to work.
Exactly,
right?
because
you are your authentic self.
Who are you? What do you need? What do you need to support you either in your career or in this project or whatever? And if you don't say it, you think the world is going to figure it out. It won't. So a lot of or even just how you want to be managed or whatever, and is so important just in terms of just bringing you to those interactions. And as I say, the only place where I really would draw the line is rude or disrespectful things like. Otherwise, I think be you, because I think it's very helpful to create authentic relationships and people to know where they stand, what they need, you need from them. Then I think the third thing that's really been helpful is that coupled with then a strong performance track record, you can't underestimate the value of your network, because there's only so much your own track record is going to get you. If there are no people who are beating the drum, saying your name in rooms where you are not even present, then it means that you're only ever as good as the opportunities that you can see. Once your network and your brand is so prevalent and you've got supporters, otherwise known as sponsors, mentors, outside of your immediate stream, those are the people that are going to say, actually, Andiswa, the lightning's about to strike here. Move 2 steps to the right. Whereas you wouldn't have known that. So I think that there is something about the network effect and the people that help you. And when people say to me, well, how do I do that? I like to say, do something good for that person. Because actually, if I've helped you or helped you to deliver something, or I've done it well for you, you're probably more inclined to actually help me when I've also not asked for it either.
Let's come to the issue of business or entrepreneurship. Some banking leaders or business leaders in banking kind of like to do things behind the curtain because there's an aura of being in banking. Now you take a very different approach where you put pen to paper, you speak, and you give people a sense of what you think entrepreneurship is and what it could be and how could banks work with entrepreneurship. Why take that risky road when you could just hide behind the risk committee or the credit committee?
Okay, so thank goodness I don't have that former posture that you describe, because I think then actually banking wouldn't have evolved and it would have remained, I suppose, quite traditional and in some aspects could be accused of being stale. And so I think that something that's certainly emboldened me to take a very much client or entrepreneur first approach, even when it then means challenging how we do things, and we don't get it right all the time, but it certainly helps to keep moving us in the right direction. Something that really helps is myself having dabbled with trying some business ideas in the past.
Your own side hustle.
Exactly, it helps because then you also get your own fingers burnt. And I also think you then also have an appreciation of how entrepreneurs value convenience because they have to get on with it with so many other things. And so even something as simple as saying, actually the entrepreneur does not have time to fill out a 20-page form. How do we trim this down? That perspective comes from actually having dabbled yourself, whereas you could be at risk of saying, but the 20-page form is how we've always done it and it's stood us in good stead. So I think that quite helps, because then I'm a banker but that dabbles as well. I think it's also very helpful to spend time with clients.
Amen.
Because if you're sitting in a boardroom in Sandton or somewhere else and with the air conditioning and the generator, you might not actually understand the true impact of, let's say, load shedding. You might not understand that when we are in stage 6 or 7 or 8 of load shedding, actually if you're a butchery, the fridges go down for 6 hours. That means rotten meat, your business is actually taking a loss. I mean, heaven forbid you run a mortuary and the fridge is off. You know what I mean? Those are the tiny things that actually, if you're not spending time with clients, you're not understanding how other things impact them and therefore how you can help, because those are some of the things that businesses need just to keep the lights on. before they even get to, okay, now how am I going to split my personal and business banking? How am I then going to have financial statements, et cetera, et cetera? I actually just need to operate. And you won't get that sitting behind a boardroom. You actually have to get out there and pound the pavement with your own feet and listen. So I think that's been really, really helpful for me in terms of my perspective, lived experience, but also spend time with your client base. Otherwise, you will lose them in the process.
As I was reading your stuff and I was listening to the interviews, I was hearing the person, right? And this is what I've always said to my colleagues in banking. Once you bring the person in you, you can make better connections for people to understand where you're coming from as a bank, where the entrepreneur is coming from, and where we can kind of link. Sometimes these two things are like this. We're talking different languages because we're not listening and speaking to one another. So have you found people resonating more with that? Because I go back just to the examples you've used. They are practical, knowledgeable, usable examples. They don't speak bank speak, they speak human speak.
So I think that if I reflect on that, a big part, as you say, is actually just bringing you to the table. And then I'm actually going to give you a lighter response.
Yes.
I think we also just need to take ourselves a little less seriously.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just honestly, I feel that if we are so starchy, then of course you're going to be a little bit guarded yourself and a bit removed. And I think having the space to just be you counts for a lot, because then actually you give rise to that authentic opportunity to listen, learn, and respond.
Yeah. Entrepreneurs out there, everybody thinks they're an entrepreneur. Everybody's got the killer app, the killer solution, the killer product, and whatever. And they all come to you and say, you got to fund me. When you're looking at that and you're saying this, what's at least the one thing you want them to understand from your perspective?
So one of the ones that, from a funding perspective, that entrepreneurs tend to miss is that it is also incumbent on you, it's your responsibility as an entrepreneur to get yourself funding ready. What do I mean by that? So in South Africa, we don't have a business credit bureau, as an example. And so one of the things that, for instance, a bank may do is say, okay, well, as the sole owner of this business, it also means that probably the business's financial strength can be derived from your personal financial track record. As the founder who's going to be responsible for repaying ultimately, how have you conducted your own finances? And so some people may be tripped up by the gym subscription that then was bouncing 3 months in a row, or the credit card that they didn't maintain in their personal capacity. But because as you're a small business or startup, especially those kind of businesses where the personal and business fortune is quite intimately tied, don't forget to keep a clean sheet in your personal capacity too. So that's the first thing that I can probably say, because you are the proxy for your business and for the reliability as to that says, I can manage my finances so well, and I do try to make sure that I keep a good repayment track record. Then the next thing that I think I'd like to highlight is that in that funding readiness journey, try to build up at least 3 to 6 months of a track record of your business finances. You're not going to be able to do that if you're still banking all your business finances in your personal account. So please do make the effort to set up a business account where your business income hits, because I promise you, just with 3, maybe 6 months worth of data, your business starts to speak for itself in terms of, this is my track record, therefore I have repayment ability. Because something that I think entrepreneurs get very frustrated about is not understanding that banks are regulated, and actually the place from which banks are probably taking money to lend to you, typically a big chunk of that is deposit holder funds. In other words, the credit positive balances sitting in people's check and savings account. So in order to make sure that we use that money responsibly when we then lend to the entrepreneur, of course we have to prove affordability, repayment, ability, etc. It's not just funding ready, and there's nothing really crunchy to show that repayment ability.
So, Andiswa, you were saying, it's not that you guys want to be funny. The money that's in the bank belongs to the other people who put their money in the bank. And you take it and you borrow it to somebody. If that person doesn't return it, what are you saying to those ones?
Exactly.
Is that your message?
And it's not just the individuals like me or you who may have anything between 10 Rand or 10,000 Rand in our check account. It's actually also the fact that banks borrow. They also actually go and so there's a various way in which banks fund themselves, either through third party, other financial institutions, or the deposit holders, as I've just said, or their own shareholders, or through retained profits that the bank has kept. And so you need to understand that that's the washing machine that is happening in when you now show up and say, I want a home loan or I want a business loan.
Because you give money.
Understand that
process money and sell the money.
There is
to
a responsibility as a responsible lender. Hence, we have these regulations protecting, also marking the bank's homework on that. It's not that we're being funny. It's because we also have to be responsible in our funding activities. Because also, if we're reckless, then we trip you up long term, entrepreneur. Because then, if we do give you funding that we can't see with a clear line of sight, how are you possibly going to repay this? Probably we're then setting you up for default and for a bad credit record, which is not good for you either.
When you're thinking about the country and the changes that are going to take place, one of the key things is the role entrepreneurs can play in helping the economy to grow. What advice are you giving entrepreneurs in taking that space?
So it's actually a challenge. Entrepreneurs, are you ready? Are you ready? Because I think that for the first time possibly in 2 decades, there's such actually an almost tentative but positive sentiment in South Africa. There is an opportunity where people are feeling that there could be some good strides made in terms of some of the economic reform agenda, in terms of, I mean, for goodness sake, touch wood, let me not jinx it. If we're going on 3 months without load shedding, let's hope that soon some of the logistics, transport, Transnet things will also start to ease. So I think that we're at a time, actually, where quite interestingly, in case nobody's noticed, there might be actually a little bit of sunshine between the lingering clouds. And so if anything, I think that entrepreneurs should be paying attention to the things that they often don't. Because I know that in the daily grind to run your business, you just want to make sure that I've baked the cake and it needs to get there on time. But actually, are you aware of the fact that if, for instance, there is infrastructure spend or roads that are about to be built in your area, what are you doing, Mr. or Mrs. B&B? What are you doing, Mr. or Mrs. Renter of equipment? What are you doing, local services, food, the mama that's going to be on the side of the road on that road project servicing those workers? Is everybody looking aware, waiting with bated breath for that kind of direction so that they themselves know how to align? That's my challenge to entrepreneurs. Lift your head, read, get ready, because actually I'm really hopeful there's going to be opportunity, and big things and big projects actually lead to opportunities for everybody in the chain. Are you ready?
And so what's your message to somebody who is not sure whether they should stay in the country or invest in the country? Why are you still bullish and lending out money of depositors to others in this economy? Why are you bullish about this country?
Firstly, perhaps naively so, I'm an eternal optimist. So I think that counts for something. And so it's a genuine belief that over time things do incrementally get better, and that there's a role for me to play and for all of us to play to help it get there. And then I think being quite deeply invested then, either because your family or broader family is still here, your community. I think as South Africans, because of that concept, it makes it very hard for us to divorce our personal aspirations with the impact to the people around us. And so I think actually it's not that hard. Tap into your inner South African, because then you'll actually make the right decisions for you and for the people that matter to you.
As a young lady who is in a township or a village somewhere in this country, who looks at their life and think there's no way I could get to the top end of a company like FNB. But Andiswa has done it. And he's doing even more great things, award-winning, making a difference. What message would you give to her?
And I suppose to keep it real, as I started this engagement with you, I told you I was born in a township clinic.
Yeah.
I was born to a school teacher of a father and an admin civil servant of a mother. And I would say that the thing that helped possibly the most in terms of teeing myself up was actually the education, because if you do have a shot at having some sort of an educational grounding that can set you up, at least it gives you half a foot in the door. And I know that there's a lot of despondency around education and what it can do for you right now, given the number of unemployed graduates that we have in the country. But my goodness, guys, don't underestimate the value of that and the fact that it is at least a foot in the door. Because once you're in, honestly, it's yours to lose.
Yeah. We're producing more young women out of our universities. They're entering the corporate sector in big numbers. Yet we still have patriarchy in our corporates. What message are you giving to young professionals as they navigate a male-dominated environment? And what's our role as leaders to create a much more inclusive environment for young women to succeed in our corporates?
I'll answer the last part and then I'll get to the first part. As leaders, I think that it's honestly incumbent on us to make sure that in micro behaviours we are advancing better diversity. And what do I mean by that? People don't just make it into the C-suite or into a CEO position. There is somebody who's possibly pulled you aside after a certain meeting and said, you know what, the way you landed that message, maybe think about crafting it this way, because that important stakeholder or committee actually better resonates if you da-da-da-da-da. So there's a bit of, coaching help that happens. So what are you doing as the leader to do that for the others? There's also an aspect of, again, another micro behavior. When you're chairing or you're sitting as a senior person in a room, and you can see that there is somebody actually that you know is quite smart, but they're not saying anything.
Yes.
What are you doing to draw them out? Do you actually say, hi, so-and-so, what would you like to add to this topic? I know you've done some work on this, etc. So I think that diversity and creating more diverse spaces is not going to be determined by numbers that tell us on a scorecard, this is the target. It's going to be leaders opening their own eyes and ears and doing the micro behaviors. Who are you taking with you to the board meeting? Who are you inviting to comment at the table? Who are you saying this person is not that ready, but let's give them a shot? That's the leadership responsibility I think exists, and we can't externalize it to somebody else. Now, to flip it and answer your earlier part, what does that individual themselves need to do? I talked a little bit about some of it. Earlier. Honestly, try your best to just do a good job. That's just the first grounding step. Then I think that bringing your authentic self to any organization will always be very helpful. Then I think don't be afraid, because I know that it's easier said than done. But actually also, if you're really good at something, you're probably going to back yourself more on it. So if you have to over prepare and actually practice, if you have to, do it. It's fine. You're not being a nerd. You're actually just setting yourself up so that you are the strongest person in the room. And then I think don't underestimate the power, as I mentioned also earlier, about what your network can do for you. Do good things. Pour into other cups. They're going to pour back into yours one day.
Wow. Andiswa, a huge thank you.
Thank you for having me.
From the bottom of my heart, firstly for the work that you do, the messages that you bring out to get entrepreneurs to understand to bring the relationship between financial institutions and entrepreneurs and business people better, to get township businesses and village business to see those opportunities. It's incredible work. I watch from a distance, and I've been in awe. And for the messages that you've delivered this morning to the young leaders, thank you. Know that you're one of the role models. More young people now will know what you do, and just keep at it and keep making us smile, keep shining, and make your parents, Israelita, to be so proud of what you've achieved. And may many more come from Israelita and other places and occupy the places that they need to occupy in corporate South Africa. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.